very warm welcome to each one of you. All the viewers watching the program from all over India, very warm welcome to you. Let me also wish you all a very, very happy Holi. I know in Chennai, people who are here say Holi means what's Holi about it. Right? But if you have been north and you have played Holi with your team, especially in armed forces, Holi is very, very more sought after function. That's one function we bring together every community. They all come together, celebrate together. And some of the North Indian states, if you get a chance to visit, you must visit Varanasi or for that matter, Mathura. You know what is Holi is all about. Anyway, once again, very happy Holi to you. And before that's why I started 2 minutes. Let me briefly tell you what's happening in MMA next few days so that you don't miss any of the good events, what's happening. Now, next event is happening on 27th of March. That's all Andhra Chamber. Let me tell what's happening here in MMA. Next event is happening. We do an outreach program. What is happening at Andhra Chamber with MMA in collaboration with them. Vaidinath and Chandramudi is going to be talking on generative AI and its application in the business world. It's happening on 27th at Andhra Chamber building. Andhra Chamber in their own auditorium. 28th, again, we have an interesting event. The discussion on the theme, leading through adversity, management and leadership principles in high-stake challenges. And it's happened, be it your personal life or in official life or anything, some adversity can come to you. How you handle those adversity? We are trying to bring in somebody who has really gone through this difficult time, the cancer survivor. She's gone through that. And also we got the person who treated thousands and thousands of cancer survivors from Apollo Proton. You know, it's one of the finest hospitals. Josh Yesko is also head of director of medical oncology, is coming from Apollo Hospital. Radhakrishnan from Dubai. She's a cancer survivor, doing so well today. She won't tell what went through her, and she is going to be telling, because this resilience happened not only for the patients, but also for everybody to think. Then we also got Anand Krishnan, is the founder of Riddle's World and former head of one of the leading organizations in the world. And we also got Rukmani Prabhakar, mediation teacher, writer, and quietly moderating. This is happening on 28th in person at the MMA Auditorium. Then on 5th of April, again, we have an international speaker. At least I'll walk my citizen team, one of the finest speaker on this subject, sustainability, why ESG is not enough. ESG is discussed quite a lot, especially young viewers watching this program, MBA students. You must know what is ESG about, why ESG is so important for Indian industry, how is it going to impact the businesses. If they have to do business, what they have to implement it. Is it fair on the part of Western countries to trust on us, whatever damage they already done for us to save? So many things, so many unanswered questions. I suggest you come and attend this event. Mr. Rajiv is going to be coming. He is from Stewardship Asia, from Singapore. He's one of the finest brain in the field of sustainability and very, very well-respected name in the world. And we also got 3 special invitees, Mr. Kumar, member of Managing Committee, Anju Mary, Director of Sustainability from Danforth, and Balachandran Gangadharan, the Deputy of Indo-Pacific Line. They'll be leading a conversation with him to share their perspective. I think will be the perspective from the media, what is it about sustainability, from the industry, automobile industry, and also Anju will be from the Danforth. Then we are on another good event on 13th of April. We always, MMA collaborates. We are collaborating with the Colors of Glory, one of the finest event, finest organization in Chennai. I know how many of you know Colors of Glory. They do some phenomenal work to showcase what armed forces done. They bring in showcase from all the tribe services, what they have done, how they brought the nation pride, and why everybody should know how one should be respected. That's what but we are collaborating with them to present this event. Is a lecture on the lives of writer Sri Kumar Verma. Sri Kumar Verma is Raja Ravi Verma's grandson. You know, Raja Ravi Verma is a painter who made some lovely paintings of all these paintings. And we want to be talking how being his grandson, what made him do this, and how good his thing and story about his grandfather, many things. And he is going to deliver Mr. S. Muthaya Memorial Lecture. You know, Muthaya is a great name in Chennai. Many of them known person, Muthaya. So it's in his honor. The memorial lecture is going to happening there. Then on 18th, we have Read and Grow. Then we are on 25th April, we have another very interesting event on seminar on arbitration in the age of globalization, navigating cross-border disputes, Indian business leadership. Again, we have an international speakers from Singapore. They come and show us what it means to be arbitration, how we can take advantage of this arbitration, and how Indian companies should really look at it, how legal expenditure, what's happening in India with Singapore. Singapore today is a hub of all arbitration around the world. So we should know what's happening in international business. It'd be very, very useful. Last one, which I want to tell you before we pack up for the day in terms of program, on the 30th April, Again, India MMA Policy Matters program is ad was making competition healthy. When I say ad was making competition healthy, I don't want to tell you why we are going to do this. You all guessed it by now, why we are doing this, and we are going to getting some outstanding speaker to come and speak on this subject. Today's topic is very, very widely discussed in newspapers, and but you always get different opinion when you get some great economists from different area come and speak on this. Right or wrong, GDP way to measure the growth. Because many countries do this because that is the one way it suits them, not suit them. But I can tell quite a bit of input what I read in many papers. But we got three outstanding panelists today. One of very, very rarely you can get something MMA today. Blessed to have the outstanding panelists to come and share the thing. Gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome Dr. Arun Kumar, retired professor of economics from JNU, Mr. Sivaraman, IAS retired, former revenue secretary and former executive director of IMF. We also have Moumita economist from Deloitte. She's come all the way from Mumbai. We have Mr. Satyamurthy, convener, policy matters, partner for this event. Very good, gentlemen, to please take your place on the dais. Ladies and gentlemen, very warm round of applause to our distinguished panel this evening. Arun Kumar joined us on online from Delhi. As usual, the format of the program, after the introductory remarks by Mr. Satyamurthy, each of the speakers are requested to speak for 15 minutes on the theme. Then thereafter, there will be a free-flowing conversation amongst the speakers for a few minutes. It's getting their each other's views on the subject. Then we'll open for Q&A. All the viewers watching the program online, please share your questions if you have any on the numbers which is flashed on the screen. We'll compile all the questions and place it before the thing. Before I call upon Satyamurthy, let me have the privilege of introducing the distinguished speakers for this evening, including Satyamurthy. Satyamurthy is a convener of Policy Matters in Chennai. He's a seasoned policy analyst, political commentator, specializing in Indian southern neighbor, particularly Maldives. And I keep getting his articles, and you must read them. Especially, I enjoy reading your articles on Tamil Nadu. What's happening? He is a great thought leader. You please request him to share. See his blog, outstanding. Very warm welcome to Satyamurthy. Pleasure to have you with us. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Arun Kumar, retired professor of economics from JNU. Arun is a professor of economics JNU, retired as the Sukhmai Chakravarti Chair Professor in 2015, with a PhD from JNU and Masters from Princeton University. He specializes in development of economics, public finance, macroeconomics, renowned for his groundbreaking work on the black money economy in India. He has authored several books and articles contributing extensively to the public policy and discussion. Very warm welcome to Mr. Arun Kumar. You must have seen him regularly on the national television and real thought leader on one of the important subjects. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Sivaraman. Mr. Sivaraman is not new to MMA. He's one of the great supporters of MMA. Always comes out and shares his thoughts, and he's got tons of experience in every field. And he's also from a DGCA. He's flown aircraft. He knows everything about aircraft. It's always a privilege to interact with him. And as I mentioned, he's former revenue secretary, former executive director of IMF, and he's on the board of IMF. And both were 40 years of experience in various departments of Indian government, holding postgraduate degree in economics, and he has also held significant position in finance, planning, commerce. Currently engages in delivering lectures, budgetary, banking, fiscal, monetary policies, and most sought after speaker in this part of the country. Very warm welcome to Sivaraman. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Let me also have the privilege of introducing Dr. Moumita. She's an economist from Deloitte, and she's come all the way from Mumbai to speak to us. Moumita is an economist, Deloitte, and also PhD from Berkeley Institute of Politics and Economics, specialized in impact on US quantitative easing and Indian financial market. With an extensive experience in academia and research, she has contributed to esteemed journals and presented findings globally. A visiting lecturer and host of podcasts, and I really urge upon each one of you, especially women who are watching this program, you must watch her podcast, Dear Money. I think you'll become very wiser and smarter. She actively promotes financial literacy and social impact of the initiative. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to the fantastic panel what we have today. And now, as I mentioned, the format of the event is after Mr. Satyamurthy shares his insight, then I request Mr. Sivaraman to share his thing. We go, followed by Mr. Arun Kumar Finally, our economist from Moumita, economist from Deloitte will share. Thereafter, they'll have some discussion within them. Then we also have a number of questions will be coming online. We'll place it before them. Over to you, Mr. Satyamurthy, for your introductory remarks.
Good evening, everybody. Some of you who have been regulars here would notice that we had another session nearly the same topic on GDP over a year ago. The idea was to educate as many people as possible on the concept of GDP and how it works. Now we are moving forward to the next level. Is the GDP way of measuring growth right or wrong? Yeah, that has become the central point of a national discourse from time to time, confined mostly to economic experts and economic newspapers and journals. That is the pink press. So there is a need for all of us to get to know what it is, what it is not, and how it can be and how it should be. As someone who has known Mr. Sivaraman especially for long, he had always said our GDP rates are not exactly what they are projected to be. No, don't think otherwise. The real GDP of India is always much more than what is projected officially. Right? At the same time, there are also other aspects. For instance, there is a question of jobless growth. This last 20-25 years of GDP-based measurement, it is not that it was not measured that way earlier. That has it addressed all aspects of growth. That takes us to the next question. What really is the growth? That is to say, we again go back. The GDP way of measuring growth is the real growth. Because there are people who are spend on GDP, but they don't really benefit from GDP measurement. So these are various aspects I thought we should discuss and get to know more from the experts. Just brief note, we commence it. Mr. Sivaraman, please. As you know, he was a former revenue secretary and a former executive director of IMF. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Satyamurthy. Thank you, Group Captain Vijay Kumar. I am probably hemmed in by two economists. One very well known, Professor Arun Kumar, who has written extensively on many subjects. And I pale into insignificance in the presence of economists because I cannot call myself an economist by any definition of the term. And however, having dealt with finance, government finance, for a very long time, several decades, both at the state level, at the national level, and also to a large extent at the international level, I have some familiarity with the subject. Now, the subject is very interesting. GDP, right or wrong? GDP way to measure growth. It is both right and wrong. Because GDP is the process by way, you can say that GDP is a process because it continues over several years. The measurement of it continues over several years. And one of the articles in The Economist said, the 1959 GDP of the United Kingdom is still undergoing revision. The GDP measurement, rather its compilation is an extraordinarily complex and difficult process. The United Nations has got a manual, and that manual has been prepared by almost all countries putting in their efforts. India was also a participant in it. The CSO, Director General, is always a member of that committee. So they have a manual running into, it is a 2008 manual, which is still being revised. The GDP is gross domestic product. Of course, now it includes services also, because many of the Western countries have got more coming from the services and less from the goods. So you can say, first of all, GDP is actually gross domestic product as well as services. Product also you can include services. Why do I say it is right? Because there has to be some measure as to what is being produced in the country. So the only measure is the GDP. Now, as far as the GDP, for example, if you look at the way it was evolved, actually it evolved in sometime in, let me say exactly, William Petty is one of the very ancient economists of United Kingdom. He was a doctor. He was the man who started the concept of gross domestic product in 1660. And at that time, he estimated the GDP of United Kingdom at 40 million pounds. And now it is 1 trillion pounds. Thereafter, a lot of improvements took place. As far as India is concerned, it was Dadabhai Nauroji who first assessed India's income. He assessed the agricultural income of India, and he added a certain percentage to it to find out what is the income of India. This was in 1876. But the technical process of compiling GDP was done by Dr. V.K. Rao, the founder of the Delhi School of Economics. His PhD thesis in Cambridge was the national income of British India in 1931-32. So we have also been quite progressive in this area of measuring the GDP. In the last so many years, a lot of refinements have taken place. And if you look at the manual, it is so massive. How to compute interest? Because GDP, what is GDP? GDP is wages, interest, rent, and profits. So this is GDP. Looked at from a production angle, it is goods and services produced. Looked at from an expenditure angle, it is expenditure incurred by consumers, expenditure incurred by the government, expenditure on investment. So these are different ways of formulating the GDP or looking at the GDP. And the statistician estimated from 3 different angles, but never they arrive at, they are never equal because there are always some problems. So therefore, if you look at GDP, GDP itself, you see, you cannot say it is a correct estimate. You cannot say it is an accurate estimate because it keeps on changing as and when more and more new data comes in. And that is why they have this United Nations Committee on National Income, which keeps on revising as and when they get more and more information, more and more changes. Why do I say GDP is still not accurate? Because the free services that have come into being in the digital age, internet services, whether they're including it or not, correctly including it or not, it's not there. What about the services given by WhatsApp? Suppose you are sending a message, which can be a classified message, you send it with all kinds of protection. That letter, if you were to send it by a courier to Delhi, will cost you 85 rupees. If you send it by internet, it costs you nothing. So what is the value addition in that? You can say, let's say, assume 85 rupees, whereas you're getting it free. So it is not part of the GDP. Similarly, the problem is of estimating government services that are given to various people. Now let us take defense. We have several defense officers here. Defense. How defense, for example, in the form of salaries that are paid to defense personnel, it comes in. But how do you evaluate the contribution of a person who dies on the front? There's no way to evaluate it. So therefore, defense assets on both the borders or all over India, which is being protected by the defense forces, there is no correct evaluation of the services rendered by them. There are several other services which are being given by the government. Parks are being constructed to improve the environment. How do you value the services rendered to the society on that? What about the services rendered by your wife? By cooking your food or attending to various chores inside the house? What about, for example, your own self? Today you are driven your car, let us say from Adaya to this center, Anashala. If you had employed a driver, you would have paid him 400 rupees. So that is a value addition. Whereas you have driven the car, there is no value addition of your own service to yourself. So these are some of the serious deficiencies that you notice in the GDP. The other important defect in the GDP is, if you have the total GDP, let us say India's GDP is estimated to be around 310 lakh crores at the end of February. I saw a report somewhere. Now, 310 lakh crores is the total GDP. Now, per capita GDP is worked out by dividing it by the population. It doesn't mean anything because it doesn't show how the poor are living. What is the distribution of income? That is the major defect in the GDP. It doesn't show the distribution of income. It doesn't show how the various income groups in the country are getting the benefit of the production process within the system. Now, this is the reason why Mr. Sarkozy, of course, Mr. Sarkozy has gone into a lot of problems after that, and not because of that. He set up a committee to inquire into the correct measurement of economic and social welfare. This is known as the Stiglitz and Fitoussi Committee, of which A.K. Sen was a member, and also Bina Agarwal from the Delhi University was also a member. They produced a very interesting report in which they have pointed out all the serious deficiencies that are there in the GDP as a measure. GDP as a measure is not a measure of the welfare that people are getting in the society. So GDP itself does not say anything. The per capita income does not say anything. If today India's per capita income is XYZ $3,000 or something, doesn't say anything. Because if XYZ spends $200 million on the pre-marriage celebrations, the $200 million would have probably funded the entire yearly expenditure of 100,000 people, and they would have lived comfortably. So that is the kind of deficiency that you have in the GDP measure. Now, there was a conference. I don't want to steal the thunder out of the presentations by the two brilliant economists here. There was a conference at the Economic Statistics Center of Excellence, annual conference in May 2019. This conference discussed the different other measures, how to measure what is really happening to the society. Now, one of the most important things that have happened in recent times is the development of the multidimensional poverty index, as you call it, MPI. Our Niti Aayog is also doing it. And the Human Development Report, which has come very recently, it has classified all the countries on the basis of the HDI index, which they have done. Now, what is the HDI index? Global MPI uses 10 indicators covering 3 areas, namely health, education, and standard of living. Health dimension includes nutrition and child and adolescent mortality indicators. Child mortality, infant mortality, in India it has substantially reduced now. In Tamil Nadu it is almost at the international level. Kerala also it is at the international level. Several states have achieved at that level, but many states have not achieved. So this is not reflected in the GDP at all. Then you have education dimension includes years of schooling and school attendance. Years of schooling and school attendance also differs vastly across India. If you go to Bihar, hardly 6 to 7 years of education, or some cases it may be 12 years, but if you come down south, the average number of years of education which a person undergoes, man or woman, is around 12 to 14 years. That is a measure of the welfare of the people. Then you go to the standard of living dimension, includes indicators, namely housing, household assets, type of cooking fuel, access to sanitation, drinking water, and electricity. GDP does not show any of these things. Now, this MPA, which is being handled by the Niti Aayog, and one might say that the Niti Aayog also does some kind of mathematical gymnastics, because very recently they came out with a report saying so many people have gone out of poverty and they are only 11.28% are below the account level. But this has been done through mathematical extrapolation and not by actual surveys. Now, where did the NITI get all its information? They got this information from the National Family Health Survey, the 5th round. That is, I think, 2019-20. So that's again 4 years ago. And that data that they collected 4 years ago, they have projected it on a mathematical basis that whatever improvement has taken place, they will continue to take place or have taken place, and therefore the poverty level has substantially come down. Economists may object to it. This is not the way to do it. You must do some surveys. What are the other countries doing in this regard to this? We are doing the multi-dimensional poverty index. This is what we are doing. But if you look at other countries, there are countries which are doing a lot of other things also. First thing that I want to mention is the gross national happiness, some kind of a concept introduced by Jigme Singye Wangchuk. The father of the present king. I used to know him very well because I had gone to Bhutan several times and met with him. Now, he introduced the concept of gross national happiness because Bhutan didn't have any industry. They have 1 or 2 industries. Even today, they have only 1 or 2 industries. This includes income, again, income per capita, health and life expectancy, social support, freedom to make life's choice. Freedom to make life's choice is again a concept evolved by Dr. A.K. Sen. Capability and functioning. This is his major contribution towards this area. And now things are developing in the line in which he wanted it to develop. Trust in government. So if you see the various polls that are taken place across the world, you find that trust in government has gone down abysmally low. Then trust in government and trust in business people, equally they have also gone below. Generosity of people, that again varies from country to country. Then there is a personal well-being survey of the United Kingdom. This is a very interesting survey that the United Kingdom carries out year to year. And that has 59 indices. I will try to locate it so that, it is interesting for you to know what exactly some of these. The personal well-being indices index contains 59 items. Life satisfaction, feeling things done in life are worthwhile. They go and investigate it around the country to find out whether what you're doing is worthwhile or not. Many people may think that what we are doing is not worthwhile at all. Happiness. Percentage of UK adults reporting low levels of feeling happy has remained stable over the last year. Incidentally, as far as India is concerned, the latest report shows that people in Afghanistan are more happy. People in Pakistan are more happier than in India. People in Somalia are happier than in India. People in Iran are happier than in India. How they came to that conclusion, nobody knows. This is what they have been questioning. How did they come to that conclusion? Maybe people in India are not at all satisfied. Maybe even Ambani may not be very satisfied in spite of having $200 billion. So that is what it reveals, this global happiness index or whatever it is. Now, then there is this personal well-being, happiness, I said. Then over 8 to 10 adults in Great Britain feel they have people in their lives to rely on if they have a serious problem. This is another very important thing of well-being in society. GDP does not measure any of these things. Then in societies like in Scandinavia, people are always lonely. Similarly, in some other tribal societies in India, where I have also served, there is one village here, one village 20 kilometers away. There are 4 huts here, 15 huts there. Like that, people are also lonely. So this is again, whether they are lonely. And in Scandinavia, many people are very lonely and they commit suicide because of the weather conditions, because of various conditions there. Local community integration. I wonder, as far as India is concerned, probably this index will be quite substantial because there is a lot of local community integration here. Trust in others. Trust in others means trust in you. First of all, trust in yourself. Then trust in your neighbor. Then trust in the community in which you're serving, the business community or your own businesses. And then the trust in the government ultimately. Can you trust the government? So in the case of United Kingdom, this has continued to remain at 65.9%. So I don't know what it will be in India. Healthy life expectancy. In India, the life expectancy as per the Human Development Index, which is the report which has come very recently, is only about 67. Whereas I went into the data which the government has now, it has crossed 70. So you would find that whatever index that the Human Development report of the United Nations has given has already been improved upon, because that report also contains data of 2019-20 only. Maybe we'll hear more from Mr. Arun Kumar on these matters, because he's glued onto it day in to day out. So these are very many things which are happening. OECD similarly, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they similarly conduct a survey which is more or less equal to the survey of the British government which they are doing. And the British government also does it periodically to find out where they are moving. Now, if you look at the GDP, GDP does not contain any information on these things. Even if you analyze the GDP statistics, which is produced in the CSO in thousands and thousands of pages, even if you delve deep into it, you will not be able to find out all these things which are particularly important from the point of view of human welfare. Now, I will close. Before I close, I want to raise a point. The point is, Professor Arun Kumar, I am addressing it to you, sir. Last time also we talked about this. Professor Arun Kumar wrote in his article, estimation, let's look at the GDP itself, which I think Satyamurthy referred to, but now I will refer to it very correctly. In his article, Estimation of the Size of Black Money in India, 1996-2012, in the EPW in its issue of November 2016, he said that according to his calculations, the black money in the year 2011-12 was 62,72,061, or around 62% of the GDP in that year. The GDP, I'm not going into base year and all that, but he estimated around 62%. He will clarify it further to us. So if you project that, probably, he called it black GDP. Again, I would request Professor Arun Kumar to clarify what he meant by black GDP. Now, if you add that to the regular GDP, and if you retain that 62 lakh crores as it was in 2012, that is 12 years ago, today's India GDP should be around 372 lakh crores. So you divide it by 82, you are already $4.5 trillion economy. Assuming that it is not 62%, it is only 40%. The rest of the thing has been cleaned or whatever it is by demonetization and GST and all. 40% of 310 lakhs is 120 lakhs. So it is 430 lakhs. So again, you are near $5 trillion economy. So I will close this by requesting Professor Arun Kumar to clarify on this matter. By saying once again, the GDP is the only measure that countries can look at from the point of view of whether the economy is producing more and more goods. But at the same time, it is hiding the very important fact that while you are producing goods, you are also consuming capital. So you have to look at the depreciation, and depreciation, of course, differs from company to company. In the company account, there are a lot of chartered accountants here. One company may have 30% depreciation for machinery, whatever the income tax takes. So it all depends upon depreciation also differs. So you have to look at the net national product or net GDP. Then thirdly, you also look at the many things which are omitted from the GDP as such. And if they are all included, what will be the GDP of today? So the GDP as such, you see, we have to have a GDP. We have to improve upon the measures. And as far as India is concerned, in 1998, after a lot of effort with the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Planning Commission, I got the GDP of India revised upwards by 18% at the time, because there was a danger of India losing its seat on the International Monetary Fund, and because I was pressing for the PPP GDP to be used in the formula by which we get our voting strength or our quotas. Ultimately, it succeeded in 1998. I was forcing, I had written papers on it, I submitted. It got approved in 2007 or 2008. Now, IMF and World Bank are using PPP GDP for purpose of determining the strength. Again, PPP GDP, if you look at it, year after year, they keep on including more and more items in the basket. Now they think there are 3,000 items in the basket, and there is different weights that are attached to it. Many economists may question the weights that are being attached to it. Somewhere more weight is attached to food items, somewhere more is attached to TVs or whatever entertainment. So there are problems there. But we cannot deny the fact that we must have some kind of a measure which today that is available is only GDP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a very clear enunciation. Now I request. Yeah. Professor Arun Kumar from Delhi is online. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me share my PPT. Can you see the PPT now? Yeah. So the title of what I am presenting is GDP growth, and what does it tell us? Okay. So the first thing is, we can read the title in two possible ways. First is, can GDP be used to measure growth in an economy, right? Mr. Sivaraman has already made a. Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, Professor, you are clear.
Okay. So, is GDP correctly measuring growth today? That's one. International agencies are, also supporting that India is growing fast. But, let me remind that, basically they are not independent data gathering agencies, and they depend on the official data. So they reproduce the error that is there in our GDP data. So the first question that I was raising is about GDP itself. What is an economy? It's a sum total of the economic activity that generates incomes for the citizens. Mr. Sivaraman has already mentioned several things. This sum total is called the national income. Now the economy is hugely diverse, so it is not easy to estimate it. As Mr. Sivaraman has already mentioned, there are a lot of things that go on. Yet we want some kind of a measure, so we need a monetary value for that, and that's what we are trying to do, how to get a monetary value for this. Now, the economy is also rapidly undergoing change because of technology, and that is also difficult to account for. A car of today is not the same as a car of, say, 20 years back. Typewriter is not the same as the computer of today, which we use for typing. So there are a lot of problems about that also in the GDP measure. The national income is estimated. That's the other thing that we need to be careful about. It is not reported by each individual, and it is estimated by using various methods. Mr. Sivaraman has already pointed to many of the problems that come up. So therefore, there are enormous difficulties in doing that. Now, on the way to getting the national income, we come to the idea of production. Production is of goods and services. So we have to measure the goods and services produced in the economy. Because of the diversity in the economy, we find that the whole GDP is divided into different sectors. Each sector itself is further divided into other industries and so on. Like in agriculture, there may be 200 crops. In industry, there may be thousands of industries and so on. So what we do is we look for some similarities and we club things together. So the first way to club is that we call primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. These are the three broad areas. Primary comes from nature. Secondary comes actually on top of that. So we produce sugarcane, and from sugarcane, we produce sugar. We produce cotton in the primary sector, and with that, we produce cloth. So that comes to a secondary. Then we have the tertiary sector, which is used for distribution of the entire production. So we have finance, and you have your trade, and you have other services and so on in the tertiary sector. So in other words, the primary, secondary, and tertiary is one division, and that is further broken down into 9 major sectors. Now, each major sector itself is diverse. As I was saying, agriculture can be of 200 crops, mining can be of large number of different kinds of metals produced and other minerals produced, and so on. So therefore, we require different methods to measure the contribution of each of them to the GDP. And as Mr. Sivaraman was saying, that they have to further subtract depreciation from that to be able to arrive at the net domestic product. And from the net domestic product, then we come to the idea of the national income. So difference between domestic and national means domestic is what is within the country, and national means also taking care of what is being earned outside the country. Now, the question arises, as Mr. Sivaraman already flagged, that does GDP measure the welfare of the citizens? So that's the problem, as he already said, that the distribution of the income across different groups of people is not given by the GDP measure. So therefore, as he said, what a poor person is earning, what a rich person is earning will be vastly different. And therefore, GDP doesn't represent the measure of welfare of everybody. It's an average. The average doesn't take care of everybody, etc. So therefore, the question is that, as he was also saying, that there are certain activities that are not included at all, which actually improve the welfare of the citizens. And he gave many examples of that. I will not go into that. Like he gave the example of cooking at home or ordering food from outside. If we order food from outside, the GDP goes up. If we produce the same food at home, then the GDP doesn't go up. So there are these problems of there. And then the very big problem of free services that women give at home. So that is another issue that he has flagged, so I will not go into that. Now, the problem further is that is the GDP itself correct? And he made many points. I'll make a few points here about that. GDP is an estimate. This we must remember, that we don't report our income, we don't report individual production, so we have to estimate it. Now, to estimate it, what we require is the data. So the data may be inadequate, and the second is the method that is used to estimate based on that data. Now, if data is inadequate, then the method has to be particularly better so that it can take into account the data issues that are there. So in other words, the problem arises in the GDP, both from the data inadequacy or inappropriateness and the method that is used in that. Now, just to give the scheme of what I'll be saying further, the Indian situation, we have two kinds of GDP that we get. We get the annual GDP and we get the quarterly GDP. The quarterly GDP is based on very little data that's available for the quarter. At times, we use what's called the very rapidly changing data that's coming in very quickly. And then we have the annual data, which is basically an aggregation of the quarterly data and then revision of that. But the problem that has arisen in the Indian economy is that since 2016-17, when demonetization took place, a shock has been administered to the economy. And when a shock is administered to the economy, then the problem of data gets aggravated and the problem of the method also gets aggravated. So the question arises, what is the current rate of growth of the economy? Is it what the government is, and officially it is being claimed, or is there something else? Secondly, we know that disparities are rising. Disparities increase, actually create more problems for measurement of GDP. So the pattern of growth in the Indian economy today is K-shaped, with the organized sector growing fast and the unorganized sector actually, in my judgment, declining. So this is the economic divide, which is creating a problem for the data. As I said, the organized sector is rising, the unorganized sector is declining. And we've had several shocks to the economy since 2016-17. First, the shock was demonetization. Then the GST produced a shock. Then the NBFC crisis in 2018. And then the lockdown in 2020. So all these have affected the unorganized sector. So one part of the economy has been very badly affected by these shocks. And this damage is not captured by the official data, because what we do in the case of the unorganized sector data is that we use the organized sector data to measure the unorganized sector data. Now, that is not correct. Then there's a problem even in agriculture data. In the quarterly data, we use the targets and we say that the targets are fulfilled. Now, we know very often the targets in agriculture are not fulfilled. Then the other problem is that there are 39 subsectors of the unorganized sector, and 29 of them are measured by using the organized sector data. So this is again not a correct procedure because we are proxying the unorganized by the organized sector data. Therefore, we are proxying a declining sector by a growing sector, and that gives an upward bias to our GDP data. Now, we can take the example from demonetization. The official data shows that during the demonetization year 2016-17, the highest growth rate of GDP was there of 8% plus, and that's the highest of the decade of 2010 to 2020. But we know that from November 2016 onward, up to the end of the 2016-17, the entire economy suffered. The perishables rotted in the fields, fruits, vegetables, flowers. I have given data that how in the Azadpur Mandi of Delhi, which is the largest wholesale market, less than half of the fruits, vegetables, etc. were coming. So we saw that the wholesale markets were closed and so on. So in other words, this suggests that actually the economy had declined in 2016-17, but because of the methodological problem, we actually show the highest growth of the decade of 2010-20. This is the graph which shows how the change has taken place in the quarterly annual growth. We can see that, from 2017-18 quarter one, the rate of growth had plummeted very rapidly. This is the official data. So if you include the unorganized sector data separately, then the rate of growth would have plummeted even further. Now, when we look at the recovery from the pandemic, again, the rate of growth has gone up. But if you look at the RBI data for 2021-22, it shows that corporate sales were rising at 41% and the profits at 20%. This is the case when the economy in that year hardly grew. So what it suggests is that the growth of corporate sector is taking place at the expense of the non-corporate sector. So in other words, the corporate sector has colonized the non-corporate sector, and the pricing power of the corporate sector has risen because of the monopoly power that it managed to get. Now, so what is the official growth rate and how it has been slowing down? We need to look at that. So as I said, the growth rate was already dipping before the pandemic came. It had reached 3.1% in the quarter just before the pandemic started. So if you look at the various problems that have come in because of the inequalities due to the decline in the unorganized sector, then what you find is that the rate of growth of the economy has not been 6 or 7%, but more like 2 to 3%. So in other words, the Indian economy is not the fastest growing economy as is claimed officially. And that is because the unorganized sector data is not there. Unorganized sector is proxied by the organized sector, which is not the correct method to do it. This is a graph which shows how the economy has been behaving. As you can see, it was declining even before the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, officially it has risen, fallen, then risen and fallen in quarterly terms. But the average rate of growth probably is about 6.5% in the period that the last 10 years or so. Now, what is the evidence of decline of the unorganized sector? We have evidence from the FMCG sector, the trade sector, the pressure cooker sector, the luggage industry, the leather industry, etc., where the reports are that the unorganized sector is unambiguously declining while the organized sector is rising. In trade, it is clear that we have the e-commerce rising very dramatically at 20-30%, and that's at the expense of the neighborhood stores. In the pressure cooker industry, Mr. Jagannathan, who's the president of the prestige pressure cooker industry and the pressure cooker industry as a whole, he has said that we have 5 units in the organized sector. We have been growing at 24%. The unorganized sector is declining. In the case of the luggage industry, similarly, we have the largest luggage industry producer, the VIP, and its chairperson has said exactly the same thing. Same thing from the leather goods industry and so on. So in other words, if the unorganized sector is declining and the data that is coming in is only representing the organized sector, then I've given various calculations here to show that if the unorganized sector is at 0% growth, then the rate of growth would come to 3.72%. If the unorganized sector is declining at 5%, it would come to 2.17%. If the decline in the unorganized sector is 10%, then the rate of growth would come to 0.62%. And this is assuming that the rate of the growth of the organized sector is correctly measured. If that is also in error, then there's a problem. I had written a separate paper in the Wire showing that the decline in the unorganized sector is probably around 10%, in which case our rate of growth would be more like 1 to 2% rather than 7 or 8%. Now, What about the unorganized sector income and poverty? If we are to talk about that, then we find that, on the e-Shram portal, the unorganized sector people are being registered. Now, according to the Prime Minister, 30 crore people have been registered, and 94% say that they're earning less than 10,000 rupees per month. Now, if we look at the World Bank poverty line of $2.15 per person per day, that comes to, for a family of 5, to 26,500 rupees per month. In other words, most of the families would be actually way below the poverty line. But people say that that is the data in in nominal dollars. If we convert it to PPP terms, then it comes to 9,500 rupees per month. And that also is around the poverty line of the country. So in other words, large percentage of the population is near the poverty line, if not actually below the poverty line of the World Bank. Now, as compared to the Indian poverty line, maybe they are above, but actually globally they are close to the poverty line, bulk of the population. Now, in this context, it's important to realize what is the hierarchy of inequality. We have three kinds of inequality. There's consumption inequality, there's income inequality, and then there is a wealth inequality. Recently, the consumption data has come, and the consumption data is seemingly suggesting that the consumption inequality has declined. But usually, the incomes of the rich people are much larger than their consumption. They have higher savings, and therefore the income inequality is much greater than the consumption inequality. And this is not measured, but there are rough estimates of that from the World Inequality Report. That 1% earn 22% and 50% at the bottom have only 13%. Now, this data does not incorporate the black income generation, as Mr. Sivaraman was mentioning from my paper of 2016. If you include that, then the top 1% would be earning more like 40%, and the bottom 50% would be earning more like 4 or 5%, and so on. Credit Suisse has given some data on the wealth. But again, this data is not based on the estimate of the black economy. It's based only on the white economy data. So actually, what we find is that if you include the black income generation, then the wealth inequality would be even greater than what it is shown by the Credit Suisse data. But in general, wealth inequality would be greater than income inequality, and income inequality would be greater than the consumption inequality. What we need to focus on is the income inequality, because this income inequality is very important as far as the GDP is concerned and as far as the growth is concerned. Now, this inequality has various dimensions to it. There is an inequality between capital and labor, between the organized and the unorganized sector. Then within the manufacturing sector, we have the large and the MSME. We have the micro sector, we have the small sector, the medium sector, and the large sector. The large sector has 6,000 firms, the small and medium has 6 lakh firms, and the micro has 6 crore firms. So in other words, there's a huge disparity. And of the MSME, the micro sector is 99% of the units and 97.5% of the employment. And it's the micro sector and the small sector that have been hurt very badly. And that's why the unemployment situation in the country is going out of hand. Then there's a divide between agriculture and non-agriculture, between urban and rural. There's the caste divide and community divide. Then there's regional divide between north and south and so on. And then finally, there's the gender divide. So in other words, the inequality itself is very complex, and this needs to be taken care of separately. The GDP doesn't reflect this. Now, black economy is there. As Mr. Sivaraman said, I have pointed out that the size of black economy has increased from 4 to 5% in 1955-56, when Professor Kaldor came to India to measure the black economy, to 62%, which is what I gave in my paper in 2016. And that's the figure for 2012-13. So if it is still 62%, then of the 300 lakh crores, 180 lakh crore would be the black income size today. In other words, the GDP is much larger than what the GDP officially is given. But the point is that it prevents us from reaching the potential of the economy. Because what is happening is that the black economy is like digging holes and filling holes. So you set one person to dig a hole and then set another person to fill the hole. So you have 2 incomes, but 0 output. So this is what I call activity without productivity. So as far as the GDP is concerned, 2 incomes will be counted, whereas as far as production is concerned, there'll be 0 output to be counted. So in other words, the black income generation lowers the investment productivity. And as a result, it makes the economy more inefficient. And therefore, what happens is the economy is not able to realize the potential. So I've shown in a paper that because of the black economy, India has been losing 5% rate of growth since the mid 70s. So today, the Indian economy could have been a $24 trillion economy rather than a $3.5 trillion economy. We would be roughly the size of the US economy if the black economy had not existed. So in other words, the black economy magnifies all the problems that I have mentioned about inequality, about growth, and so on. Also, what we need to notice is that we are unable to tackle the black economy. That's why the direct tax GDP ratio is not going up. If we had tackled the black economy, the direct tax GDP ratio would have gone up, but it has hovered for the last 15 years between 5.5% and 6.2%. So the direct tax GDP ratio not changing implies the black economy still is very large. Now, let me conclude. So the points I've made is the GDP and poverty data that are officially given are incorrect. Hello. Yeah. So our growth is A, negligible, and B, highly skewed. And that's what the inequality is rising. And because the inequality is rising, the unorganized sector is losing about 10 to 12 lakh crores annually after demonetization. The what is given as labhartis to them is only 3 to 4 lakh crores. So unless we reduce inequalities, our growth will not pick up and it will not represent what is happening in the economy. So problem is really demand, not supply side. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Dr. Moumita.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I have a follow mic. It's a mic, is there? Is it echoing? Is this okay? So, thank you, Captain, for inviting me to be part of this panel. Mr. Satyamurthy, of course, a lot of writing, and it's an honor to be here. The panel is very strong and talking about what has not happened and how the measures are wrong. I would like to take a different view in the entire scheme of things. Let me start by saying the question, GDP, way to measure growth, is it right or wrong? It's a rhetoric question. Why do I say it's a rhetoric question? Because as Mr. Sivaraman said, that GDP has been the measure which we have spoken about since 1870, India. And there has been no other measure which has taken its place. There isn't one indicator which has come close to substitute GDP as the measure of economic growth. And all the countries use it. So at the best, what we are talking about is a rhetoric question. Is it good? Is it right? Is it wrong? I think the question what we are trying to address here is how to make GDP growth more robust. Is it actually incorporating all what is happening in the economy? I think that is a question which we are trying to answer in our capacity. What I am trying to talk about here is the previous two members have been talking about what has not happened. Let me show some light on what has actually happened. Okay, we may not see or rely on the GDP data which is there, which is a point taken. But are we developing? Are there indicators which are showing that there has been some development in the economy? Then also it tells us that if there is development or is there no development. So I'll just take you through few statistics to talk about what has happened. The physical, social, and digital infrastructure in the past 10 years, how has it grown? Because if we look at this, it is a proxy of whether the country is improving or not. So just some statistics we are talking about. As we all know, the government has been doing a lot of capital expenditure and it has been doing it quite heavily and front loading it. If you look at infrastructure, what has happened in the last 10 years, the number of airports, the cargo handle, the rail route, the national highways, these have all improved. while the basic discussion is that pushing infrastructure is not going to be enough, but the fact is there has been an improvement in infrastructure and quite a significant improvement which we are seeing. And this is a way to facilitate growth in the coming years. Let us move to social expenditure, which has been the biggest problem which we have been talking about. We do not invest in education, we do not invest in health, which is going to lower our capability to grow in the coming years, which is true. But we cannot go from 0 to 1 directly. We have to go to the entire process. So are we towards 0 or are we towards 1? I would say we are moving towards 1, but maybe we are a far way away from 1. If you look at these few indicators, the government has been spending around 6.8% CAGR on social services, which includes your education, health. And if you look at some of these indicators, which come from the National Family Health Welfare Studies, which is done periodically, the gender parity index in higher education, that has improved. The IMR, which is the infant mortality rate, that has improved. The maternal mortality rate has improved. The labor force participation rate has gone up. The Pakka housing has gone up. If you compare these numbers to a very developed country like US, of course, these numbers would not look very good. But for a developing country like us, this is improvement. This is development which we are looking at. Now, let me move to the biggest change which we have seen in the last 10 years. That is the push on digitalization. If you look at some of the indicators which we are getting now, we as a country did not have a lot of data in the past, but now we are getting a lot of data, high frequency data, which is coming up at a regular frequency. So we can actually incorporate those to understand what is happening to the economy. Now, if you look at the Jan Dhan accounts, there has been a massive growth in the Jan Dhan accounts. Even if you look at the rural and the semi-urban beneficiaries, they are also having a lot of Jan Dhan accounts. Aadhaar, which has been one of the path-breaking digitalization which we have gone through. If you look at the statistics, the UPI transaction by volume, the CoWIN, the DigiLocker, the numbers show that UPI has saved the Indian economy approximately INR 5.5 trillion between 2016 and June 2023. So we are saving, which is going to help us propel growth in the future. If you look at the fast track, the BharatNet ONDC, let me just bring you to this digitalization of the capital market. Capital market, there has been a lot of work which is happening in the that space. SEBI has been a forerunner and pushing things a lot. The monetary benefits of technology, that has say few of the things is the settlement is very quick now. The MF redemption is in T+3 days. They have added to investors almost INR 35 billions annually. Okay, these are numbers which are taken from reports. These are not our calculations. And the last point is India's digital economy grew almost 2.4 times, and it has generated 62.4 million jobs during this period. Now, employment has been an Achilles heel for us, but the digitalization of the economy is actually helping the ball roll. So, sorry, I forgot this. So when we see what has happened, I just spoke about the digital infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, and the social infrastructure. These are proxies of growth. So if you don't want to look at GDP, okay, you decide not to look at GDP. So you look at development indicators. All these indicators are showing some kind of momentum. So, and what is that resulting in? That is also resulting in a lot of good macroeconomic numbers. Now, when you look at the current account balance, in 2012-13, we were termed as the fragile five because our economic fundamentals were very weak. But look at now, the current account balance, our foreign exchange reserves, that has improved quite significantly. If you look at the fiscal deficit, of course, we are facing the problem. Pandemic threw us off the curve, but we are in line of attaining a fiscal consolidation in the near future. If you look at the banking sector, the net NPAs, that has shown very high improvement. Now, it's a chicken and egg story. What has led to what? But the fact is, we are seeing improvement, development in social indicators. We are seeing improvement in the macroeconomic numbers as well. Sorry, I'll just use this. Some other growth which we have seen, the FDI gross inflows in India, that has changed significantly in the past 10 years. Now it's actually this year has not been good for FDI inflows. But if you don't take a year-to-year comparison, if you take a decadal comparison, which is like a good enough time period, you see the numbers have almost doubled. So something which we might be doing right, to get the people to actually come and invest in us. If you look at the trade basket is moving from traditional basket to high value basket. What is high value basket? It means for the same amount of effort which you do, you get a higher value. So that means your GDP is also increasing at a higher clip than a traditional basket would lead to the growth, right? And then we come to GDP numbers. Let me not talk about a lot of GDP numbers because we are not sure whether these numbers are right or not right. But let me look at inflation. In the past few years, with the inflation control of inflation, so now we have a control on inflation. Inflation cannot move to double digits, which we have seen in the past. We have gone through a very bad past where inflation in India would be at around 10% above. Think of 10% inflation annually. That's higher than your paycheck, like increment. So basically you would be going down on your real value of money, but that has come down. That is still 4 and 5%. Look at rural inflation. I think rural inflation is still at 5%. There are only 5 states as of now, which is a little bit higher than 6% numbers. That is a good number because if rural inflation is low, then that helps the rural economy actually save some money. They have got higher personal disposable income. So let me just talk about the trickle-down effect. View the growth story or the development story in another way. So we talk about that the poor, there is some estimates which Mr. Sivaraman and was talking about that our poverty has actually the number of people coming out of poverty has there's a number which has been quoted which may not be correct. Let me not get into that. Let me just talk about this assumption of how our consumption basket or how our consumers is changing. Now, if you look at this, the left side is where we are in 2021-22 and where we are projected in 30-31. If you look at people with income less than 1.25 lakhs, they were 38 million right now, which is 12% of the population. They are likely to go to 6% of the population. And even the middle income, which is like people who are earning around 1.25 to 5 lakhs, they were 50% now, they will move to 38%. So basically the poor, the number of poor are shrinking and the number of rich and ultra rich, that is increasing. Okay. We can challenge this data, but this is real. This is an estimate we are talking about. This left side is an estimate we are talking about because we are here and we are saying what will happen in 30-31. But this is not an estimate. This is what is happening in actual terms. People are actually doing a lot of investment in EV segments, okay, and that is then across the income groups, low, middle, and high. They are wanting to buy higher electronic vehicles. That means they are conscious of the climate, so they can think beyond their purchasing power and they want to invest more for the betterment of the economy. Market size of preventive healthcare. If a person does not have the money to actually take care of his healthcare, would a person actually go and do an annual health checkup? Wouldn't it be extra money? But if you see preventive healthcare market, that's also rising. When do people become conscious of their health? When people have taken care of their basic sustainability, which is food, shelter, clothing. So what I'm trying to say is somewhere we are moving from basic sustainability to one level up, which is we are thinking of what more now. So this is a brief presentation which I wanted to talk about. And the last thing which I want to end with is this is a chart which shows GDP per capita and HDI. HDI is an old measure of well-being, which is the Human Development Index. What I have is the top 10 countries ranked in HDI. Those are mostly the Nordic countries and the European countries. If you see, there's a high correlation between the Human Development Index and the GDP per capita. A simple point I'm trying to make here is we need to be rich to have a better HDI. Without being rich, we do not have a say at the table. So I think it is important that we think of this, that it's important to get rich first, and that is driven by some. The entire population cannot become rich suddenly. It is the some who become rich and then pull the others. So those are, with that, I would like to end. Thank you. ये mic off करो.
A wonderful presentation with facts and figures. And I will tell you my practical experience in the field. A couple of weeks ago, I traveled 1,300 kilometers inside UP. Farrukhabad, Azamgarh, Sadana, the interior most parts of UP. I found vibrant activity there. We are having several projects in that area. I talked to everyone in the village. What is the current state of well-being? All of them have got TV sets. All of them have got two-wheelers. All of them have got many good things in life. And I did not find poverty at the abysmal level, or even poverty even at a reasonable level. By and large, in the entire UP belt which I traveled, which is supposed to be very poor, there was tremendous amount of activity, and the farmers were telling me that they are not getting labor to do their work in the farm fields. I asked them why. He said, sir, you are going to travel from Farrukhabad up to Lucknow, which is about 300 kilometers. You just see. Every point you found new industries coming up. 2,000 industries were coming up on that belt alone. And a new express highway is being built all over from along the Ganges, from that place up to Lucknow. So things are happening in this country. Now coming to Tamil Nadu, where I have intensively interacted with about 30 villages, where I have done projects. I have seen them 12 years ago when I started the project, and I've seen them now. In fact, I did an evaluation. Post that, I made 4 girls, research scholars, to do an evaluation. So in the evaluation, we had about 90 people from these villages, 7 each from each village. Women were there, 50% women, 50% male folk. So I'm just giving you because none of you will be able to do this. You won't be able to travel in those places. So I asked the women folk, what is your current level? Monetary income. By and large, all of them have got at least 2 to 4 cows, which means an average income, net income after expenditure, between 500 to 800 rupees a day. So those women folk told me, we don't depend upon our husbands. We have got enough money. Then we took statistics. How many of those houses have got color TV, two-wheelers, refrigerators, washing machines? By and large, all of them had. Then we checked up with the men folk. What was your productivity and yield 12 years ago, and what is your current yield? 12 years ago, their yield was 2 tons per hectare of paddy. Today, they are between 5 to 6 tons per hectare. Earlier, they were taking 1 crop. Now they are taking 2 crops, sometimes 3 crops. So that is the level of improvement that I see in the interior most parts of Tamil Nadu. Somewhere in the interior, some 30, 40 kilometers away from Tiruvannamalai, in Virudhunagar, in Salem, all these places I have visited. So this is the kind of growth and activity that you are witnessing in the villages. You cannot deny this. No, I am not contradicting Professor Arun Kumar in any way. He has done a statistical analysis of all these things. And I also went to the MSME ministry to find out. The MSME ministry says that the number of MSMEs units getting registered has been increasing day by day, month by month, and it is now 64 million units are registered, and they have not gone down. That is what they say, and probably Professor Arun Kumar may reply to this. Why haven't they gone down if they have been destroyed? If they have been taken over by the organized sector, in which case this number should have gone down from 64 million, it should have come down to 50 or 40 million. But today it is about 64 million. And their contribution for export continues to be 40% of the export that are being made in India. So there is something somewhere wrong. Either I am wrong or some other figures that are being bandied about are wrong. I don't know. So I want to congratulate this young lady. She has done a wonderful job of projecting all these figures, which shows India on a rising trend. Thank you.
Thank you. Over 680 people are watching, and I almost got 30-40 questions actually. But we got another 15 minutes to go. We'll try and accommodate as many questions as possible. Thank you, Mr. Arun Kumar. The first question is, I think Mr. Arun, Dr. Arun, you can switch off your light. You're very bright. We're not able to see your face. Maybe you put on your light. Able to hear me, Dr. Arun?
Yeah, I think the frame is frozen for me. You know, it's not, Zoom is not responding. So I'll switch out and switch back again. I'll restart the Zoom again.
No need. It's perfectly okay, sir. We'll go ahead. Another few minutes only. The first question addressed to Dr. Arun Kumar is, can you elaborate on the factors contributing to the seemingly robust growth reflected in the Q3 of 23-24? GDP data, and are there any specific sector or policies driving this growth? What's your view? So it's a question from Mr. Ashok from Chennai.
Yeah, so, you know, the GDP data, as I was saying, is based on the organized sector data. It's not based on the unorganized.
Okay, so you will join us again. In the meanwhile, I'll address the question to the other panelists here, including Satyamurthy. The question is there a current scheme as deficiencies? How do we rectify them? And or can you suggest any other alternate models that can be foolproof? Maybe Moumita, you would like to take on this question. What do you think is the best scheme if it's not there? And they're also added one more question to this. What is your take on the Bhutanese model of gross domestic happiness? Can similar schemes be functional in the large country like India? Thereafter, I'll request Mr. Sivaraman also to share your thoughts on this.
Hello. Yes. So thank you for the question. One thing we have to understand, so I'm starting with the gross happiness index. A country like Bhutan, how big is it? And what are we? Where are we? So to do any kind of index survey, it requires a lot of logistic cost. And with a big population, how do you actually do it? So every time we want to ape the Nordic countries, which is hardly few lakhs of people, we cannot do it. So let us acknowledge what we have and do what we can the best. We cannot have a lot of survey, which is like a census survey, because it would be then taking away a lot of money from useful expenditure to doing the surveys.
Good. Sivaraman?
I agree with you. There's no point in making all these surveys, which I mentioned about OECD surveys or the British survey of 59 indices and all. They are very small countries, 6 crore population, 5 crore population and all that. If we have to do that survey, it is going to cost enormous amounts. That is why you see people like me who are working with NGOs and all, we are going there and looking at it and seeing what is really happening in the field. So I have been traveling extensively all over the country, Telangana, Orissa, Karnataka, and all these places. I'm seeing for myself. I have worked as a collector in one of the worst districts of this country, tribal district, 85% tribal population. And I'm seeing what are the changes that are taking place elsewhere also. And if you go across Tamil Nadu, you will find Tamil Nadu is more or less, you know, a developed place. You won't find poverty or anything in most of the places.
Thanks. So here's a question, any one of you can take this. There's a question from Purnima from Udaipur. How can we balance the need for quantitative data with the qualitative insights provided by the alternative metrics such as happiness surveys and capital indices?
So again, this is, you see, measuring the welfare aspect again is on the basis of a scale. You go to XYZ person and ask him how happy he is. Then he will say, all right, in a scale of 1 to 10, what is your level of happiness? This is again very subjective. On the day on which you have asked that question, he might have been unhappy. His son might not have sent him money, or he might have disobeyed him. So he might have been unhappy. He say, I am very unhappy. So you can't say this. That day when so-and-so was attending the pre-wedding reception of his son said something about his past and all the difficulty, and he started crying. He was unhappy at that particular point of time with $150 billion. So it's very difficult to measure these things because, again, as I mentioned to you, Pakistan is happier than India in the last survey of gross national happiness by the World Organization. Somalia is happier with 250 children missing. So these surveys, as she rightly pointed out, they cost money, but they don't take us anywhere on these matters. Ultimately, we have to fall back on GDP and certain other elements such as the multidimensional poverty index.
Thank you, sir. Here's a question. Both are related questions. I will read both the questions. It's question from Chennai. Can you provide examples of countries or regions that are successfully transited away from the GDP-centric models of the development, and what lessons can be learned from these changes, and what are the potential risks and unintended consequences of transiting away from the GDP as a measure for growth, and how can this can be avoided, and what's your thoughts on this? Dr. Arun, can I read the questions? Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yes.
Question is two questions which are related to each other. Can you provide an example of countries or regions that have successfully transited away from the GDP culture models, GDP-centric models of development, and what lessons can be learned from their experience? And also in continuum of that is another question. What are the potential risks and unintended consequences of transiting away from the GDP as the primary measure of growth? And how can these risks can be mitigated through thoughtful policy and implementation? What's your advice to the present people who are managing these things?
GDP is one number, as was said by the other speakers also, which gives you a measure of how much production is taking place in the economy. It doesn't tell you what is the distribution. And I think that's the criticism. And that's why, as Mr. Sivaraman said, alternate measures were thought of, but none of them have been as successful in making a comparison in terms of the production of the economy. So therefore, the nations stick to it, the United Nations, the World Bank, and they all stick to this one number. And that's where, I think we are at the moment. The question is that in the Indian context, our poverty line also keeps changing. The poverty line is not fixed. As development takes place, poverty line keeps changing. So it's space and time specific. So, for instance, if you are in Ladakh, you need good energy, good clothing, good housing to survive one winter. But in the plains, that is a middle class existence. And in Tamil Nadu, you can survive under a thatch roof with a veshti and a banana. So the poverty line has to depend on the space and time specificity. So you cannot compare poverty line of 2022-23 with 2012-13 or with 2005-6 or to 1993. We don't have the current poverty line because that has not been defined as yet. We have been only trying to project it from the past, which is not a correct procedure. So in other words, what we need to do is we need to have a national consensus on what we define as poverty and think about that. Now, my advice to the policymaker today would be, let us quickly collect data. We have not been collecting data adequately, and that's creating problem. So for instance, the census data has not been done. And census data is crucial for all the surveys that are done, whether it's the National Health and Family Survey, whether it's the Consumption Survey, etc. Without having a census, we are not able to do that data. Similarly, what has happened is that our employment data is based on our definition, not the ILO definition, which is a comparative definition where we look at people earning in the age group of 15 to 64. So our data has to be more reliable. The more reliable data we have, the more reliable policies we'll be able to make. And even if the data is adverse, we should stick to it because that's the only way to improve the data. So I'm not saying that there has been no improvement in the economy from 1947. All I'm saying is that actually there are many persisting problems and the GDP does not represent the unorganized sector. And therefore, we are only planning for the organized sector. Like, for instance, in the budget, we are giving more allocation to capital-intensive areas rather than the labor-intensive areas, whereas we need to generate employment on a large scale for the youth and for the women. So in other words, policy has to change to be more inclusive, and where the unorganized sector will be benefited, that will lead to demand generation. And today our industry faces the demand problem. So if we have more demand generation, industry would do much better. And therefore, we have to tackle the inequality problem. If we say that we first make the country rich, in the meanwhile, inequality will increase. And that's where the problem lies, because as George Soros and Warren Buffett, etc., have been saying, our problem is that the rich are paying very little tax. Recently, the Piketty report also suggests that we need to collect more direct taxes and therefore be able to spend more on the public services. So Warren Buffett and George Soros, what they said was supported by the American rich, by the Italian, the French, and the German rich also. But in India, we have not gone for that. So, if you think about it, even if you look at Henry Ford, when the Model T car was produced, he said, why will I mass produce it unless my workers can buy it? And therefore, he said the workers' wages must go up. Otherwise, the mass production doesn't make sense. What he was pointing to was the demand problem in the economy. And the demand problem is afflicting the Indian economy for the last many years. We need to tackle that for a faster growth. The potential of the economy will be realized if we have less inequality and we can tackle the black economy, which leads to investment, unproductive investment in the economy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Professor. We got another 3 minutes. I'll try and squeeze in 2 more questions. Here's the next question, also addressed to Dr. Arun Kumar. How do you address the concerns about the accuracy and reliability of the GDP data, particularly in the light of discrepancies between the official figures and the ground economic realities, and what implications does this have on the economic policy making and public perception and public spending and much more? I'll also read the second question. This can be answered by the other panelists here. What role can civil society organizations and grassroots movements play in advocating for the adoption of alternative measures of progress and measuring the GDP, effectively engaging with the policymakers and public spending? Now over to you, Mr. Arun, then followed by, I'll request others.
Yeah. So given the time shortage, as I was saying, our database has to be much better. We have to focus on the unorganized sector much more. In the absence of focusing on the unorganized sector, our policies are also not tackling it. The MSME sector must be divided between micro separately and the small and medium, because whatever is done for the medium sector, the benefit doesn't go to the micro sector. So MSME. Similarly, GST must also be reformed, because that is damaging the small and the micro sector, even though they are being kept out of it. Thirdly, the employment generation must be made more robust by focusing on employment generation. Today, with the use of artificial intelligence and automation, what is happening is that the unemployment problem is rising, and this will rise even further as ChatGPT, etc., go to higher and higher levels. Even skilled jobs will start getting affected. So we must be very conscious of this from now on. And finally, our wages should be living wage rather than the minimum wage. That's what is promised in the Constitution. We must go, and then the demand would rise, and therefore the economy would rise much faster as a result of that.
Dr. Sivaraman would like to add? Yes. And thereafter, Moumita.
Yeah, that's one point with which I agree entirely with Professor Arun Kumar. I believe there is a report which has been submitted by a committee to the Government of India on the minimum wage. The minimum wage now, according to Government of India standard, is about 176 rupees a day. This is proposed to be raised to 360 rupees a day or something. Now, that is one of the important barriers to to a certain extent, the equalization of incomes. If it is 376 rupees, then many of the skilled labor would get more. That's not happening. In Kerala, if you see an unskilled laborer gets 800 rupees. In Tamil Nadu, he gets 400 rupees. So that is makes a very big difference, as Professor Arun Kumar has very clearly pointed out. Now, the other point is regarding the MSME sector. The MSME sector is growing. You cannot say it has been destroyed. Secondly, I may not agree with Professor Arun Kumar regarding the GST. It has disturbed a lot. No, it has not. For example, in fact, I am the person who organized the first meeting of the GST Council. At that time, it was not known as GST Council, but it was Finance Ministers meeting at that time. And at that time, everyone agreed with VAT, and most of the states implemented VAT, some withdrew. But now GST has become the norm almost in 170 countries of the world. 170. We cannot go back to the old sales tax system, which means we will have different countries, 36 countries having 36 different sales tax laws. The kind of immense problems companies had, registration in every state and all kinds of problems. So GST has solved it. Secondly, as Professor Arun Kumar, I don't have to carry coal to Newcastle. Now the tax is on the value addition. At that time, it was a tax on tax. After paying the excise duty at the factory point, the sales tax was on the excise duty cum price. So all kinds of complications were there. That is how I introduced the SENVAT, at least at the central government level. That is followed by the state governments at the VAT. Now GST, of course, is uniformly.
If Dr. Arun Kumar want to say something, would you like to listen to him, sir? Dr. Arun Kumar, please go ahead.
Yeah, GST is collected from the organized sector, not from the unorganized sector. So the GST's growth is only representing the organized sector, not the unorganized sector. That's the point number one. Second point is that I didn't say that we go back to where we were earlier. All I was saying is it needs a reform so that the unorganized sector, which it faces problems as a result of GST, those problems are resolved. There's a lot of corruption that is coming up with regard to GST. As we know, the fake input credit that is being there, the e-way bills that is there. So there are a lot of problems. And let me also say that there's no one country where the GST has been in the ideal form. GST has been a halfway house in India, which has created problems. GST should be one single tax rate. We have 9 different tax rates. Which creates problems, which enables evasion to take place, and so on and so forth. So all I said was GST needs to be reformed to make it better. I didn't say go back to where you were earlier.
I agree, sir. Moumita, your parting thoughts. As a GST, sir, even we have a MMA problems. I don't know what all they raise objection on us. We don't know to answer that. Moumita, you.
Let me move away from GST and talk about what new things can be done. My thought is whenever we want to do something, we think of something new. What if we don't try to do something new, just improve what is already there? See, the MSME units, there has a lot of policies which have already been introduced by the government. The National Monetization Plan, the infrastructure pipeline, it is also doing a lot of things for the MSME sector. I think what is required is knowledge sharing. How do we inform the people what exists? That is the missing part. So that is one thing. Instead of trying to bring in new committees, new schemes, we need to tell what is there and how can they reap the benefits. How to make GST more easier. How to make it easier? How can they save their time? I think that is what is required, one point. And the second point, I think it's important. We have a report card system for maybe the governments. This is something which I heard the SEBI chairperson talk about. She presented a report card of SEBI. So what she has been doing is she has been floating a lot of discussion papers, asking the people, is there a problem? How do you suggest we can go about navigating the problem? So asking the normal people to actually point out the problem. I think that is relevant here because if the governments ask the people, what is your problem? They can actually say what is the problem. So I think that is also something which can be very relevant. Ask the people what is the problem and then look for the solution.
Yeah, fully agree. Yes, report card is there for us. We get every quarter, but for the government report card happens only once in 5 years. Maybe Dr. Arun Kumar would like to add the one final comment before we close. We already overshot that scheduled time. Over to you, Dr. Arun Kumar.
SEBI, I'm glad the point about SEBI has been raised. There are a large number of problems that the stock markets face, whether it be insider trading, where recently all kinds of reports have come, where the shareholders are having a lot of problem in RNTA. RNTA don't even read the papers that are submitted, and they just like in my case, for instance, I'll give you an example from Colgate Palmolive. My mother passed away. I wrote to them saying that my mother has passed away. They wrote back to me saying that we are sorry to hear that you have passed away and you can get your shares transferred in your mother's name. Now, this kind of nonsense, I have seen with all kinds of things, so that the SEBI is not even cognizant of this,
I agree, sir. They must have written for a Colgate smile. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, what a fascinating evening and great insights. May I request Mr. Lakshmi Narayan to please come onto the stage because we have all doctors coming to me. He's our honorary treasurer. Dr. Arun Kumar, you are separated by the distance since you are not able to present to you.
Thank you.
On your behalf, this is what we are going to do it to you. You can see it on the screen. What we do is great people like you come and speak at MMA. We are able to do a lot of social work at different schools, and this is what we are going to do.
Thank you.
Books on your behalf, the poor children studying in schools. So that will add tremendous value to us. And thank you for joining us from Delhi. We also have a memento, a painting done by your school children. We do as a part of CSR work. I request Mr. Lakshmi Narayan and Satyamurthy, please join them and presenting the memento. Ladies and gentlemen, a very round of applause. viewers, more than 600 numbers watching. Thank you so much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm quite sure we kindled your thought process watching, at least to know what's happening. And this is a subject which you can go on, go on, and go on. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for putting so many questions. But many of the questions we have no answers, but most of the questions have been answered by the team. Till we meet again, thank you so much for joining us online. People who have joined us physically, thank you. Till we meet again, bye-bye, good night. Thank you, Dr. Arun Kumar. It's
Thank
always-
you very much. Thank you.
I'll keep in touch with you when I come to Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.